Welcome to the Rooted Healing podcast, where we seek to deepen our kinship with the living landscapes around us and within us. This is a space where stories heal with words that weave us closer to our wild and interrelational nature, where we explore ways to root down intimately with the land, ecosystems, communities, and practices that help us heal, reimagine, and co-create the world we remember to belong in.
When the land whispers, don't be a stranger, that irresistible call to come home. To the wandering swear an allegiance, renew an old contract to Rome.
So here is a repertoire of songs that speaks about them. When we start to sing them, we suddenly start to remember that we have had an ancient relationship with these species. So how can they be going extinct on our watch? What has happened that has allowed, in the years since these songs were stopped being sung, for those species? And I think there's a correlation that when we stop singing the songs, we stop learning how to protect the land.
Mercury Prize-nominated folk singer, conservationist, song collector and activist Sam Lee plays a unique role in the British music scene, breaking boundaries between traditional and contemporary music and the assumed places and ways folk song is appreciated. Sam's voice has helped challenge what old songs hold for us today. With his latest critically acclaimed and Mojo album of the month, Song Dreaming, which comes out today, is where Sam said, quote, "I wanted to sing a vision of what a conversation between us and the land could be, to restore and inspire a practice of songful immersion in nature that brings with it healing, something we need now more than ever."
Baby, but the last smile I will take to the sky. Land journeys outshine destinations. Intuition outdestine our fears. Let blisters be teachers, with blessings bestowed. Let the darkness restore us as seers. I'll make these pathways my companions, be witnessed by what cannot be seen. Be peregrine, be pasture, be tiny, be vaster. Be as soft as green moss, and be free.
Having already listened to Sam's music for years, I attended a gathering in Dartmoor co-hosted by Sam last summer, exploring the idea of song dreaming. And I read his book soon after. You'll hear in this episode the gushing excitement in my voice, quite embarrassingly so at the end, to be honest. But it's just too easy to fall in love with Sam's charm, creativity, and depth of connection with songs and the land that they have risen from. Song Dreaming, his new album, which I've been blessed to hear a sneak peek of, is heart-wrenchingly beautiful, of which his songs Green Mossy Banks and Meeting is a Pleasant Place are woven into this episode, and this album will of course be linked in the show notes. Sam's debut novel, The Nightingale, Notes on a Songbird, richly captivates this highly endangered bird and their place in culture, folklore, music, and literature throughout the millennia. This book moved me to tears at multiple moments, and quite frankly, Sam Lee, in all his creations, has a tendency to move me and many others to tears of connection and longing. I think it's because he is a rare breed and someone who is re-enchanting many of us back into the landscapes in such an intimate, deeply familiar, songful way. Sam is the founder of the Nest Collective, holding vibrant annual gatherings, including a diverse range of music events across the UK, featuring outstanding, emerging and established folk, world and roots artists from around the world. Perhaps most notably are his Singing with Nightingales gatherings in spring, where you can step silently into the night and listen as the finest musicians in the land duet with the sweet song of the ever more endangered and rare nightingale. Go to this gathering if it is within your reach. Just go. Sam's also a regular radio and TV broadcaster, film soundtrack composer, and has provided songs for several major feature films. And as a change maker in the music industry, he is co-founder of Music Declares Emergency, FAC board member, and the pioneering artist to work with leading environmental charity Earth Percent, to whom a portion of proceeds of his current album will be donated. If you enjoy this podcast in general, then my guess is you'll either already know of Sam Lee, or you will go and devour his music, his book, and the opportunities to gather with fellow beautiful beings, of which all I can say is you're welcome. If you'd like to learn more about our work at Rooted Healing, you can head to rootedhealing.org and join us at one of our ceremonial nature-led gatherings or online courses. We have a very special gathering coming up this summer in Eryri, North Wales, called Ancestral, where you can join us and embody ancestral village life full of songs, ancient stories, craft and ceremonies, all to bring us closer to our ancestors, ourselves, the future generations, to the land, and of course our more than human kin. So here is our beloved Sam Lee. Enjoy.
Oh, can't you see the little turtle dove sitting under the mulberry tree? See how that she does mourn for her true love, as I shall mourn for thee, my love, as I shall mourn for thee.
I'm a Londoner, so I will have to say that the clay bottom valley that I grew up in is what has moulded me. But I'm also a bit chalky too, from the chalk streams of the Downs, the North Chalk Band and the Southern Chalk Bands, and all the streams that run off them. They've been very inspiring and formative for me. And a species that has played a very big role in my life for a long, long time is not the nightingale, it's the heron. So I'm gonna choose the heron on this occasion because I fear we might talk about the nightingale. The nightingale's all my attention all the time, but right now I'm gonna say the grey heron.
Oh, yeah, I was curious if you'd go for the the obvious one there if you'd bring something else in. And I absolutely love the heron. I find them to be such wise birds. I really connect them to the old hag personally, especially after Sharon Blackie's storytelling with the heron. So I want to hear, why has the heron played such a big role in your life?
It was the first bird that came in as the big messenger bird with a real pay attention. And it was I first discovered that, I mean, I'd always been aware of herons and had some pretty like special experiences throughout my life with them. The bird that probably was most noted as appearing at significant times, but then came up in my homeopathic remedy as curing me of some quite serious heart palpitations. And I took one tincture of heron and boom, it was gone. And then suddenly herons started appearing everywhere at really significant times, giving me lots of insight into what I should and shouldn't do. So I'm very grateful to heron for being the first bird that came along and went, "Oi, watch what I do."
Wow, I love that. I feel really ignorant in this moment. I didn't know you could have homeopathic bits of animals.
Yeah.
Amazing. One thing that's really captured me in your book is this notion of our ability to extend ourselves into the landscape through birdsong. And you've written, the birdsong choruses of dawn and dusk have always been a part of the human oral experience, only to eventually be denied by double glazing and indifference. And I was wondering if you could speak to this loss that, whether knowingly or unknowingly, and sort of looking at the shifting baseline syndrome generation by generation, we no longer really have that taste of these morning and evening choruses that would have really shaped our worldview in so many ways. Can you just speak to that?
The dawn and evening choruses of birds, that's been part of our audio upbringing, our soundscape, our part of our culture forever and ever and ever. And, you know, as long as humans have been on this planet, we have been surrounded by birds, and birdsong probably hasn't changed that much in the time it's taken for us to evolve to become the human beings we are. So if you think about it, the only thing that's changed is our geographical location, and we've been in these islands in Northern Europe for thousands of years, and very much there's been shiftings of landscape, of ecology, but ultimately the birds would have been constantly there, constantly singing throughout the year. And that was a very big part of our information receiving radar, which birds were singing, why they were singing, when, not just the dawn and evening choruses, but throughout the day, how we perceived incredible detail that is held within birdsong. And that over the generations grew and grew in its kind of richness and understanding and mythologizing, and how it entered into story and song. And then suddenly within the last, I don't know how many years, you know, let's say 100 years, we have stopped paying attention. And certainly as our attention is less dependent on birdsong for our survival, which at one point it was not that long ago, one could say that we've sort of stopped caring. And a large proportion of our country have stopped listening, stopped making the effort to listen, covered our ears up, be that through double glazing, through headphones, through indifference. And yeah, we now have a kind of situation where people just don't know the birds are there, don't understand it. It doesn't mean anything. It's not, we don't have any way into that language. And when you can't hear the language of the birds, you miss out on the amazing wisdom and the capacity for it to enrich to swell our hearts. And yeah, that's a long answer.
I'm reminded of the various ways we are disconnected from our environment, and also the evolution of song itself. You know, you've been a song collector and going all over the place to find these songs before they're extinct. And I think of this feeling now, how many birds are actually at risk and how many birds are endangered, including the glorious nightingale, who I'm sure we're going to be talking so much about. I guess I'd love to get a sense of you. You know, you've spoken about the folk song and bird song of the nightingale being these fringe things that survive the economic growth, this idea of them being in the wasteland and roughing on through. In fact, I'm just going to find the bit you said because it was so amazing. The song has persisted in unwanted scrapland and managed reserves that are not fully colonized by economic opportunity, folk song and bird song alike, surviving in the margins and at the edges of man's dominance. Man's in quotes. So what has your process been like, harboring and tending to these songs? What drew you to want to know them before they go extinct? And I suppose just finding the links there with also the bird song that you weave yourself so intimately with.
Well, I can only answer this in this situation by kind of correlating it to, and particularly the nightingale, the bird that finds their home often in that scrap wasteland, the sort of scrub, the neglected land, the land we sort of look out our train or car windows and go, God, look, nobody's doing anything with that. No one's looking after that spot. And lo and behold, it's often there, these pillowing, mushrooming blackthorn bushes out of control, quote unquote, are actually the places of great sanctuary for so many species, birds, small mammals, all sorts. And I think I had that same, before my appreciation of nightingales, knew that there were these songs around, these folk songs, a little bit like a bird that might have gone extinct from this country. I knew that I was being told that folk songs no longer were being sung in the oral tradition by people living in the British Isles. They were all sung by revivalists, people who'd learnt the songs from recordings or manuscripts or from other, revival singers, or from the educational system, from school, or doing their folk music degree. And I was like, I don't believe that there are no more folk songs being sung out on the land, and that all our source bearers, our tradition bearers, and our source singers have long since died. And I was only 25 when I got interested in this, so I was hot-headed and willing to put some time into it. And nobody had been out song collecting in this country since the kind of 70s, maybe early 80s. So I went out and met up with the members of the English Gypsy, Irish Traveller, Scottish Traveller communities, and they're found often in marginal land under motorways, kind of sidings, the sort of bits of land that nobody would really want to own, where there was no economic advantage or possibility in housing developments and things like that. That's where the travellers lived. And it was within those communities that I found this very rare singing still happening, mostly amongst the very elders of those communities. And so once again, the fringes where opportunity wasn't to be found for the majority, something very beautiful and rare managed to continue.
And I can just only imagine 25-year-old you. I mean, how do you even find the caravan door to knock on? And then what do you even say? And I'd love for you to just give a taste of what that looked like, what that felt like for you.
Definitely it took a lot of courage. It's really scary, stepping into places where you're not welcome in many ways. And you know that you're not welcome because there's a community that are protecting themselves from the abuse and persecution of people from my community, the settled community. But I was evangelical enough and determined enough to kind of push through some of that fear and the guard dogs and the railings and the looks I'd get from people as I drove in a car that was not recognized, and realizing later on that there were the only people who outside of the travellers that came into these places were the police, social services, and the church, the trying to sell religion. My first experience was, as they all kind of ended up being, was me knocking on some doors, asking who was the oldest, who might sing some songs, getting passed from one place to another. And eventually, my first ever experience of song collecting, knocked on a caravan door. It opened, and there was Rob Dog Penfold, the man I was told had all the old songs. And he was a big man, and he was just there, sitting right in front of the door at the dining room table in this big caravan, and just about to tuck into his dinner. And I was like, "Oh God, this is the wrong timing." and I said, "Hi, I hear you sing some of the old songs. I'm a singer, and I'm really interested in hearing some of the old songs." And one of his daughters who was there went, "You're a singer? Go on then, sing us an old song." And there I had what I call the gypsy test, and I had to sing as best I could one of the old songs that they might know, from one of their families. I knew some songs from the Penfolds, and I sang. And he said, "Come in, sit down. What are you eating?" And they ended up putting a plate of food in front of me, and I recorded a few lovely old songs, not the oldest of songs from Rob Dog. But he was so pleased that somebody was interested in his singing. Nobody had asked him about that for years and years, and he was proud of his songs. And before I left, he said, "I've got something for you, hold on." And he went to the back of his caravan, and he pulled out a bottle of champagne. And he goes, "I want you to have this." And I was like, "Really? I can't take a bottle of champagne." "No, I want you. I'm so thrilled that you came and asked. Here you are. This is for you." Alas, I never got given a bottle of champagne after that. I'd be a very drunk man if I did. But it was my first experience of what a positive thing song collecting can be. Going and listening to a community that are never listened to and are never appreciated enough.
Yeah, gosh. So I love hearing these stories. And I remember you talking about this in Dartmoor. We were wondering, well, why is it the oldest of the oldest in these communities that are the only ones still carrying these songs? And it's almost like they're about to become extinct with that generation. Why aren't the next generations carrying them forth? And you asked someone this, and I just would love to hear you repeat their answer.
All the singers that still had any songs, anyone who had any, were all of the age of about 75 and over. And no one really much younger, even a little bit younger, had anything like a repertoire to pay attention to, or of note. And it turns out that there's an age cutoff whereby anyone who is younger than 10 or 11 years old in about 1974, the summer of 1974, would have not been aware of the cultural shift that occurred at that time, when a very simple thing happened in technology, which was and commerce, which is that Woolworths started selling portable televisions. And when that happened, every traveller went and bought a portable television, bought it in the caravan. And at that point, everybody stopped listening to the old singers. That was a kind of line in the sand, before which they sat outside and sang the songs, after which they just sat and watched the television. And it's kind of an amazing story, because it has echoes in so much else in our form of consuming of culture, and where we receive our culturalizing from, and how much we've now outsourced it. And what that represented was a community that was still in touch with their source, and their songs and their stories, and that lineage from the elders. And if you hadn't had a few years under your belt listening to them around the fire in the 1970s, then you were too young to have experienced it, and that's where it ended.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful story in terms of really being able to trace almost to the exact date that the oral tradition got severed.
But those shifts have happened historically for thousands of years, as every new culture comes into the British Isles, and and subdues the earlier practices. What doesn't die is this way that oral culture, this is I think the critical, the medium through which orality has existed has been pretty unbroken, because people have just learned from person to person. And sometimes you've not been allowed to sing certain things, and you've had to sing certain things, or speak about, or practice certain things, or pray to certain things. But ultimately, for the majority of the world, going back forever, it's been an illiterate oral passing down, with only certain people in a privileged place to be able to note things down. That's the shift that after the television comes in and technology sort of swoops in over the last 40, 50 years, we've seen an outsourcing of our memory banks. And that's where and I'm not saying that oral tradition doesn't still exist in many places, it does. But in terms of singing ancient song,
that there could be an almost unbroken lineage of living the old ways, hunting and gathering and putting a little finger up to any kind of systemic pressures.
A lot of the songs that are still common in the repertoires of the poaching, hunting songs, which do speak about the injustice of when the Enclosure Act comes in around the 1700s and onwards, and the commons being claimed by the ruling classes, and that sudden removal of the right to go hunting venison, hunting, collecting wood, pannage, putting your pigs out to forage for nuts and mast in the autumn time. All those sorts of things that we once had an ancestral right to do was stopped. And that gave birth to a very, very big repertoire of songs about the transports, people being sent off to Australia for 7 to 14 years, penal servitude, or hung for poaching of a hare, that sort of that time where our right and access to the land was so brutally severed. And that does still exist.
Yeah, it makes me think of the power folk song can play with the right to roam movement. And
they are so linked.
Yeah. Wow. Gosh. When I think of the lineage of songs and the migratory roots of songs and how they sort of pop up and they have their different flavor and taste, and you've talked about that a little bit in your book, finding the nightingale in songs in places where the nightingale wouldn't have been, for example, and this scattering of the oral tradition. And then also the notion of potential for symbiosis in terms of our migration route with the nightingales as human beings. I don't know, I just find the way you've spoken about this really beautiful, especially in a time where I think a lot of people listening to this were really exploring themes of belonging, of feeling native to place, of connecting to the old ways. And I'd love to hear your family migration story and how you feel that you belong on this land here in Britain, and any reflections that might come through synonymous with the migrating birds as well.
Well, yeah, I come from a migrant family history entirely. I've not a drop of British blood in me, but my family have been here since the 1900s, turn of the century. All Eastern European refugees, economic migrants, as well as fleeing persecution, the pogroms. That's the persecution of the Jews over that period in Russia and Poland and Lithuania. And my God, I'm so grateful that we got here and I was allowed to be born here, and families to have met and had this upbringing in such an extraordinary country. I have no complexity with my identity as British, as an Englishman, as a Jewish Brit, as somebody who holds a culture that when we gather as a family to do Passover or Rosh Hashanah, as is coming up, that we tell the stories of 5,500 years ago in a desert, not very close to here, and that's our ancestors. And I feel immensely comfortable. I feel in every way so attuned to the ancestors of this country, the nature that the simple fact that of the hundreds of songs I've learnt and of the hundreds and hundreds of singers that I've learnt from, all of whom are absolutely of the salt of the land, but also come from a massive diaspora of cultures that are so distinct from each other, be they East Anglian, West Country, Irish, Northern Irish, Scottish, Northeast Scotland, Traveller, Gypsy. You know, all these people represent such variety and such a multitude of different ways of relating to the land and paying homage to the land through their song, that I feel I've done my service to identify as indigenous in that respect. I know my plants, I know my birds, I know my trees. Could always get better at my mushrooms. But what's really interesting is that I feel so akin to the different landscapes here, you know, and there are some here that have had profound impact on me, but I'm also aware that a lot of these species are also natives to many other parts of Europe. If anything, I feel more aware of my sense of shame of being British than I do of my pride. I'm not sure if they're in competition but when I go to other countries, France, Spain, I've been in this year. I spent a lot of time in Romania recently doing some ecological work there, some tracking of bison and their rewilding project. And I actually see that I'm very proud to be English, but I'm deeply ashamed of the people who are in charge of looking after our natural heritage here. I'm more interested in confronting those who claim ancient lineage and immense privilege and saying, if you are so, you know, proud to be who you are, why are you causing such destruction of your land? And I think that's the place that I find myself in more often than not.
Yeah.
I feel very proud to share it because I also think that we have a broken sense of identity. And I think relationship to nature and also relationship to folk song are a wonderful way of coming to a place of understanding, and in our own sense, whether we have come from generations of Britishness, of understanding what that means and what's there to be proud of with that.
I love hearing you share about this, and there's something really profound that happened for me around the fire in Dartmoor, because my route back to the land and ancient practices has been through medicine and ceremony and, you know, a certain kind of earth-based spirituality. And what I found so poignant about being around the fire and this very simple and pure exchange of folk songs from a nice group of people was the nuance and the story and the relatability and the complete lack of pretentiousness around how to connect with lineage and ancient ways of being and the collective human heart through folk songs. It's a very different experience, I think. I know a lot of people listening to this also may be coming from more from like the medicine music realm, but this ability to connect to the collective human story through these old folk songs is a radical way to feel that belonging. And one of your chapters in your book is titled, I think, Songs Forged in Flames. And I loved this as an imagery of all of these songs and how they've grown through hundreds and sometimes thousands of years around these fires, and then tending to them in this day and age and sharing them and swapping them. So if you have any words to add there in terms of folk music as our route to belonging.
I've been learning a lot about folk songs in a very radical way and new way lately, having done 18 years of picking them up and learning them with no scrutiny in what they are and what they've served. And I've started to understand these songs in a way that actually is about what they are for the now, and what they offer us in this day and age, in 2023, in the heat wave we're having in this country right now, with climatic crisis. And what I see them as is a bit of a compass back towards nature. And I'm abusing them a little bit for these purposes. A lot of these songs are very old. They speak about times gone past, people no longer around, relationships that seem archaic. So what is it actually that they mean to us today, and what do they teach us that we can't find anywhere else? And well, I've just done a big bit of writing for the Right to Roam movement for the book that they're putting out next year, and really in about listening to what is being spoken of in terms of that adoration, that devotion towards nature, and how within the songs there's something so explicit and also implicit in their invocating a sense of wildness, an appreciation of nature that is so lost to us and has been denied and has been removed. Going back to what I was saying earlier about birdsong, about how we don't have a culture that has a stewardship where every generation is brought up with that attunement and that sense of familiarity and comfort and trust in nature, and trusting that nature trusts us. Because of that, this divorcement is what's led to this, ecological breakdown that we're in. And I speak about locally, specifically here, not just globally. But in many ways, the seeds of that were sown here in Great Britain. Let's not skirt around that. And if you were to inventorize all the species and animals that exist in folk songs, what you suddenly find is you have a list of many of the species that are threatened, going extinct in this country. Nightingales, turtle doves, skylarks, curlew, so many more that I could pick up and are lost to me right now. So here is a repertoire of songs that speaks about them. And when we start to sing them, we suddenly start to remember that we have had an ancient relationship with these species. So how can they be going extinct on our watch? What has happened that has allowed, in the years since these songs stopped being sung, for those species? And I think there's a correlation that when we stop singing the songs, we stop learning how to protect the land. And that's where it started to go. We're seeing the kind of the fallout subsequent to a breakdown in our relationship to land management, for want of a better word, for our broken farming system, for our exploitative use of the land, our extractive approach, and our lack of respect for our environment.
Yeah, I think of activism as often this very upfront, stop everything, hold the signposts up, be angry, do. Then I think of your work with the Nightingale as such a profound example of a different kind of activism, a different way of weaving folk into a level of intimacy that will surely emote radical change. Like I know many people who've been to your Singing with Nightingales events. I've yet to make it to one because of always running something the same time, but I really want to. And I feel like I've dived so deep into this world through reading your book. I'd love to hear about your first duet with a nightingale, and maybe from there just speaking about this growing relationship with this bird and how this has led to a kind of activism that I personally think is so powerful and so needed.
to speak of my first experience, having listened to nightingales for many years before I first duetted with one, the opportunity came up when I was asked to make a small doc for the BBC honouring the 90th anniversary of the BBC's first ever, in fact, radio's ever live broadcast with Beatrice Harrison in 1924, duetting with a nightingale.
Mm-hmm.
And I honoured this moment by taking a radio producer out into the woods, and there had my first experience of being in the presence of a bird, but not just listening, but singing with. And it was at that moment that the nightingale sang back. And it was mind-blowing because I had no idea that you could get so close, like within about 10 feet of the birds when they're singing, sometimes closer, but also that when you made music, they were aware and they responded, and that was mind-blowing. And at that point, I was like, I wasn't quite as aware of their rarity, and this is 10 years ago. I wasn't kind of fully in a place of knowing exactly what a desperate situation this country was in and the world was in. I was certainly very much environmentally active in that sense, but I didn't realize here was an opportunity to create an experience that might be quite transformational. But I did know that, oh my God, this is incredible. People have to hear this. You can't bring the nightingale into the auditorium. So if you can't get Mohammed to the mountain, bring the mountain to Mohammed. And set up the next year through Brighton Festival these concerts of bringing people to the woods. And it was just so obviously the most sublime thing. And it was perfect for me because I got to do 7 weeks of work, ultimately being a musician, creating a concert every night, welcoming people in, basically making a career and getting paid to sit around a campfire, singing folk songs, wandering in the dark and charming human beings in through kind of romantic, whimsical excursions. So it's totally been for my own interest. I jest. But actually, what I'm creating is exactly what I feel like is my purpose to be here, is to create the space for awe and for through sweet, romantic, whimsical experiences, bring people into as deep a connection with nature as is possible in a very short period of time. And it's a wonderful piece of theatre that is created, but it's also poignant because at the heart, it's not just a concert. It's not just a bit of bird watching. It actually is activism. It's an act of rebellion because the birds are going extinct and we're just not aware, and they're going extinct on our watch without most people in this country ever having a clue of what a nightingale sounds like and quite how important that song has been for our ancestors. So for me, I call this work palliative care because it's a way of offering gratitude to this species, worshipping at the shrine of the nightingale as we see them disappearing. Yeah,
I want to pose you the question then. Do you think the next generation will hear the nightingale?
I just don't know. I just don't know. I think we're all aware we're starting to live every year, every month, every season to the next, of seeing what shift and change occurs. The decline in nightingales is overall in this country pretty fast, but it's pretty stable in Europe. I think in the UK, it's very likely we'll lose them. But the thing is, it's not about all the issues that are affecting them. Overgrazing by deer, which are in a terrible situation of so many deer in this country, destroying so much of the nightingale's habitat. That is a big issue. Destruction of insect population, that's a massive thing. Destruction of their habitat just because of development, which is also huge. These are all things that are affecting populations in different areas. But for me, the thing that concerns me the most is that migratory species are very much at the mercy of what goes on wintering grounds, certainly
Mm.
our winter time where they are in sub-Saharan Africa. And that for me is really disturbing, because the climatic changes that are happening could start to render that home for them absolutely untenable as a living place without any food sources, desertification affecting wildfires, affecting large tracts of that land. And what is the impact on that? Because they're not getting enough food there over the winter, they won't be able to make their journey back here. And so many are dying en route. And so what I fear is that we'll have a sort of stabilized population, and then some years we'll just see that vast quantities of them just don't return back. And the forests are silent, the woodlands are silent, because they haven't returned.
It's so heartbreaking, especially when you think of how intrinsically woven the nightingale has been in our folkloric and therefore our psychic evolution as human beings on these lands, and what it symbolized for so many of us. I think of what you've shared about first times, of romance, of these springtime moments. I mean, just for anyone who's listening who might not know, nightingales sing at night when the other birds aren't singing, and they have this capacity, right, to their vocal range and their pattern range is just absolutely humongous compared to even the next qualifying wonderful songbird, like the blackbird or the thrush or something. I don't know if you want to speak to briefly just the breadth of the nightingale's capacity as a songbird.
Yeah, I mean, they are such prolific singers. They will sing from, the minute they get into the country around 12th of April, around then, they'll get to their spot, and they will start singing from 10:30 at night through till dawn, and then lots during the day as well. They are relentless. And it's a courtship song, but it's also exceptionally loud. It's about 90 decibels, their volume, from such a tiny little bird, like the size of a robin. And they can be heard about a mile away, in the cool spring air, damp spring air. Their song extends so far, and it's a very diverse song. It's got about 1,200 different sounds and about 250 phrases. So it's immensely ornate, and it's an improvised one. So they're constantly making song up, never repeating themselves. So what you hear in a nightingale is such a human-like sense of creativity in their virtuosity and their awareness of the sound world around them as well. It just gives them a sense of a species that has art within them.
We've been disconnected through our double glazing, through our thick walls and all of this. And also, I think, through a loss of adventure into the night. Most nighttime adventures now involve bars and loud music, but it's very rare that people for a pastime will go off into the woods to listen to the nightingale, listening to the bird song. And I think it can be really intimidating for some people. That's why I really love what you're doing with singing the nightingales, because we're giving everyone that permission slip to be children again, and to not have any torches, and to go off in the night in a situation that might actually be really intimidating by ourselves. I don't know if there's anything you want to speak to with that, just going off into the darkness.
I'm a firm believer, as you know, Ronnie, from the work we've done in Dartmoor, the power of the blindfold, of the removing of that primary sense of ours to start to open up the other senses, and also open our hearts a little bit to the things that emerge in that uncertainty, into those places of fear and trepidation and the excitement that can kind of emanate. And the wonderful thing of the Nightingales is that the experience that I do there is that we leave the campfire at around 10:30 or so to walk to where the birds are. And it's a good 20-30 minute walk, depending which birds are singing. And we walk in single file without any torchlight, and it's done in total silence, single file. And so everyone goes in this kind of meditative trance-like journey of just walking step by step in this train of humans. And it's such a descent into that realm. And very rarely do we get to be silent with other humans intentionally. And so lots emerges, lots comes out. For a lot of people, that is the most special and exciting bit, because it connects in with that sense of childhood wonder and curiosity. It starts to elicit an open-heartedness that makes the bird song and the music that we share with them really quite sublime, because of the place that we've brought people to through that journey.
Yeah. We've mentioned Dartmoor a few times, and this was obviously the wonderful song dreaming gathering that you did with Chris and Charlotte Pulver and all that jazz. And it was so beautiful to be with the land in that way, and to feel all these polyphonic soundscapes emerging from the folk songs you were sharing, and the way we were guided into becoming conduits for sounds of nature to come through. And this notion of reimagining or dreaming up the songlines of Britain. And I'd love for you to speak to songlines. What are songlines? And maybe, introduce the idea of song dreaming. I know you've got something brewing in the cauldron pot there, which I am immensely excited for. So yeah, let's start there. Let's start with songlines and go into song dreaming.
Well, I'm borrowing terminology here. Obviously, song lines are an English word for a concept from the Aboriginal Australian indigenous ways, and I use it with caution and full awareness of the appropriation of that term. And I've sort of coined this name song dreaming, which is a very British way of, well, it's a British equivalent to how we can start to invite a deepening relationship with land and a correspondence with land, without there necessarily being a deep ancient ancestral lineage that you have to that place, and a holding of story that is native to that place, that is coming as respectful visitor. It's there as with you being a respectful visitor to a place, and that sense of welcoming in a conversation to the land through song, through improvised song, through our own songs, through folk songs from that area, and how we can start to invoke or rendering the transparent, the ground around us, to see around us the work of our ancestors, the legacy that is there on all land, whether it's beautiful wild nature, whether it's dusty to dirty wasteland. It's all had a past. It's all been affected by humans. Some are looking better and prettier than others, but ultimately all these places need our love and our song, which is a beautiful way of showing land your love. So song dreaming is ultimately, it's devotional work, but it's also free of any sort of didactic how to, must be like this, must do that. It's whatever you feel works for your own sense of attunement to wakening up that sense of ancientness and connection to where we are.
It's so beautiful, such a beautiful concept. And when I was saying about introducing song lines, I think just for people, it's so magical, this notion that the Aboriginals can, and correct me if I'm wrong, but navigate vast landscapes through a sort of living song memory, a kind of song that's arisen with the landscapes.
We're not tuning in to a particular story or myth, but what we're doing is we're restoring, we're myth making in that place. We're reappraising the practices of what our ancestors did do, that has been molded by nature of us being so closely connected to the land historically. So there's a lot of theatre involved. There's a lot of suspension of disbelief, and there's also a suppression of the inner cynic. But there is also a kind of trusting that making sound, toning with landscape in itself is an ancient thing, has always been done, and has had profound impact on the land.
One of the beautiful things Chris brought into the space in Dartmoor was a song he'd written to sing the beavers back to the land.
Yeah.
And inspired by, I can't remember which Indigenous group of singing each other home. And we did this at the end, this notion of singing each other home. And it was really powerful, really emotional. And that felt so ancient to me too, to be reintroducing these beavers and to sing them home. And there were moments when there was these polyphonic soundscapes happening that you had sort of orchestrated their emergence with the group, and then they just took on this whole life of their own. And I felt the trees and the ferns and the bracken all around us. I felt that they were listening. It was so beautiful, this harmonious ocean of lyric and expression that I felt in that moment. I think one of the first times I felt quite proud to be human.
I adored that moment, that song, which was his own writing for a wonderful moment where the beavers were being brought to this very special land that we were doing our course on, and holds a lot of people to do ceremonial work, bushcraft work, that sort of thing. But I realized that it was a perfect example of where a song just seemed so ancient. It had come to him in a way that you can't sit down and write a song like that. It has to be received. And that's how folk songs are. And it doesn't matter if it's a new one or an old one. We often revere the ancient and don't pay attention to the need for creativity. It's a powerful gesture that he's created that will last in that place for a long time because of exactly how that song has got such a sense of purpose.
I'd love to close. There's so many things I feel I could ask you, but I would love it if you'd be happy to share a verse or two, either your own song, oh grief have I, because I feel like that's really where a lot of this conversation went to.
Oh grief have I. Do you want me to sing it or speak it?
Sing it.
Okay. Here goes. Oh grief have I, for the songs they go to decay. The garden of England once bloomed the sound of soul, now destined for some bouquet. No roses in this display. It's a verse, the sting and the tail of that song. And it's the song Garden of England, which is on my last album, Old Wow. It's the opening song, and it's really the song of songs. It's about my both love and also sadness at seeing what's happening to folk song, and in many ways a sort of uncertainty that they are being treated with being looked after in the way that folk songs need to be looked after. And actually, since writing it, I've changed my position a little bit. I think there's an amazing upsurge in where folk songs are being sung and how they're being sung, and a rewilding that's happening of them, which I think was being denied to them in the 15 years I've kind of been with them, where they've been rather stuck in some not always most healthy or vital situations, and not always sung in the way that is best to serve the song. They've done a lot of good for the people and the communities who've been custodians, but I think it's time these songs were set free in a new way.
I love that. Yeah, it's so powerful. I guess to close, I'd love just to hear your story of Berkeley Square.
Yeah.
I found that really emotional reading it. So I guess it would just be nice to hear a retelling of that to close our conversation.
Yeah. Oh, well, it really is one of my most proud moments of getting to do the work in the way that I really love doing it, which is that in 2019 April, we had the first big gathering of Extinction Rebellion's international uprising, and it was a very, very important time for a lot of us working in this movement, because it was the emergence of a new generation, a new formation of climate defending activism. And for those who were there will remember it being immensely significant and powerful, and kick-started many other organizations to start taking on the baton of climate awareness raising. And the very, very end of those 2 weeks, I was granted the great honor to run a gathering in London where we guerrilla descended into Berkeley Square in the centre of Mayfair, where, of course, the famous song "A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square" is set, even though nightingales haven't sung in Berkeley Square for probably hundreds of years. So this anthem of a song, which is both very beautiful, but at the same time ecologically quite impossible, was confronted with the possibility that we might bring nightingales back into the square, that art might reimagine, right, like bring back a return of the nightingale. And about 1,500 people turned up, filled up Berkeley Square, and there we sang and shared songs and stories about the nightingale, and how it could be a poster child for the idea of what, extinction doesn't have to look like. We let the bird song come out of people's mobile phones. We live streamed the bird so that everybody could tune into some really good quality nightingale song. And it was, the whole of the square was ringing out with their song, and musicians came and played alongside. And it was just the most beautiful, romantic and imaginative way to bring a bird back into many people's hearts.
And I love how everyone left the space continuing to play the Nightingale's song through their phone in their pocket, getting onto the tube and back to wherever it was they were going. The scattering of the nightingale from that gathering sounds so powerful. So powerful. I think you're carrying such amazing work. I'm in awe. I just
thank you, Ronnie.
yeah, I see what you're doing, and it's profound, and it's so needed, and it's deeply inspiring. It gets my brain going like fireworks, thinking of how to really find these animal allies and let them guide how we reconnect people back to them.
Bless you. Well, for me, the most important thing that can come out of this work is that other people find their own creative, imaginative way of connecting in with these species and other species, and finding it doesn't need to just be me doing it. It needs to be all of us.
Yeah.
And growing it in ways that we can. So I'm just one of many.
meeting is a pleasant place between my love and I'll go down to yonder's valley. It is there I will sit and sing. I'll sit and sing for you, my love, from morning, noon till night, and from morning, noon till night, my love. It is there I will sit and sing. Time draws circles round our lives. Put your arms round me. Measure England's miles with me, oh friend. Our walk is our release. For meeting is a pleasant place between my love and I'll go down to yonder's valley. It is there I will sit and sing. What will your four scores foresee? From your mountains down to your sea, song dreaming opens wonder paths, enchanters your melody. For meeting is a pleasant place between my love and I'll go down to yonder's valley. It is there I will sit and sing. I'll sit and sing for you, my love, from morning noon till night, and from morning noon till night, my love. It is there I will sit and sing. May the sun warm gently on your face, the wind blow from behind, the ground be soft in her embrace, and all you meet be kind. Meeting is a pleasant place between my love and I'll go down to yonder's valley. It is there I will sit and sing. I'll sit and sing for you, my love, from morning, noon till night, and from morning, noon till night, my love. It is there I will sit and sing.
Thank you for being here with the Rooted Healing community. We offer nature-led ceremonial gatherings, legal and safe psychedelic-assisted psilocybin retreats, embodied, animistic, deep ecology courses, and a growing collection of nourishing resources. Visit rootedhealing.org to learn more. You can also find us on social media at Rooted Healing Co. or follow any of the links in the show notes. There are some wonderful acts of reciprocity and cross-pollination that you can do if you are enjoying this podcast. which will help others heal and connect inner and outer landscapes. You can subscribe, rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, share episodes with your community. I found that sometimes podcast recommendations from others have been the most potent gift in the moment. And you can join our Patreon community, where you can actively place value in this resource and receive bonus material, book and gift giveaways, meditations, workshops, episode transcripts, community discussion, and discounts to our events. Your monthly contribution helps us cover the costs of running the show, and our hope is to grow enough community of gifters to really go the extra mile with this podcast. These acts of connection will help others discover our work. Thank you. The music in this episode was from Sam Lee. Oh, I love him. And Bonnie Madison, who we've been weaving in a lot right at the end here. If you'd like to feature your music on the Rooted Healing podcast, reach out via the link in the show notes. I'm your host, Veronica Stanwell. Thanks for listening.